The sky above the Veltraxis arena burned red as the twin suns began to set. Thousands of alien voices roared in excitement. Shaking the ground like thunder, it was the day of the royal trial, a sacred duel where only the strong survived. In the center of the giant arena stood a human, shirt torn, arms covered in dust and dried blood. He had no name here. Only a number burned into his shoulder. Prisoner 452. To the crowd, he was nothing more than a joke, a soft creature from a weak world. He looked small compared to the monster that now walked into the arena, the champion of Veltraxis, chosen by the princess herself, wore black armor that glowed with alien energy. His sword was as long as a human was tall, and his eyes burned with pride. He had killed over 40 enemies in this arena. None had touched him from her high crystal balcony. The princess of Veltraxis leaned forward, watching silently. Her long, silver hair shimmered in the wind, her golden robe shining with jewels. She wanted to see blood. And she expected to see the human die in seconds. The signal bell rang, loud and final. The duel had begun. The champion charged forward like a beast, his blade swinging in a wide arc. The human didn't move, not yet. Then, just as the blade came down, he rolled fast and low. The champion's sword hit nothing but air. The crowd gasped. The princess raised an eyebrow. Her interest sparked. The human grabbed a small broken spear from the sand. Not a real weapon, just leftover trash from earlier battles. But he held it like it mattered, like it was all he needed. The champion growled and came again, faster this time. The human ducked, dodged, and jumped, never letting the blade touch him. He was dancing around death. And he was smiling. People began to notice. This was not luck. This was skill. The princess leaned closer, lips parting slightly in shock. Who was this man? Then it happened. The champion raised his blade high for a final strike. But the human stepped inside the arc, far too close, and drove the broken spear straight into the champion's throat. Then, with one sharp pull, he ripped the blade from the warrior's belt, turned it, and struck. One clean strike. The champion's body split from shoulder to hip. The alien crowd screamed. Many stood in disbelief. The princess stood up so fast her throne shook behind her. Her golden goblet fell from her hand, spilling purple wine down the crystal steps. The champion's body hit the ground with a heavy, wet sound. Silence followed. Deep and unnatural. Even the wind stopped, as if the planet itself couldn't believe what had just happened. The human wiped blood from his eyes and stood over the body. He didn't smile now. He simply looked up. Straight at the princess. The ancient laws of Veltraxis were clear. Any outsider who defeated a royal champion in fair combat must take his place. And since that champion had been chosen as the princess's mate, the human now had a right by law not only to her, but also to her 6 royal handmaids. Gasps moved through the royal council like a wave. Some whispered of changing the law, of killing the human anyway. But the princess raised her hand and silence returned. She stared at the man below, her heart pounding, her thoughts racing. He was not beautiful, not refined, not alien. He was wild, untamed, and terrifying. But something inside her stirred. Something deep and ancient. A law was a law. And she had just watched this man split her champion in half like fruit. Her voice rang out across the arena, cold and clear. Let the human be cleaned and brought to my chambers, the crowd roared. Again, this time not in laughter, but in fear. Because now they understood this was no ordinary human. This was the beginning of something no one expected. Something that would shake the galaxy. The duel was over, but the real story had just begun. Asterisk, the human stood in the silent hall of judgment, hands bound in glowing chains. His clothes had been changed. Now he wore a royal tunic, clean but uncomfortable. Alien guards surrounded him, watching closely, as if he might explode at any moment. He didn't understand all the alien words being thrown around, but he knew one thing. He had killed their champion. And now things had changed big time. High above, seated on her throne of crystal vines. In light, the princess of Veltraxis looked down at him. She was calm on the outside, But inside, a storm of thoughts tore through her. She had seen many battles, many deaths, but never like that, never so fast, never so final. Her champion. Split like fruit, and now the man who did it stood below her. Not proud, not afraid, just silent, staring at her like she was just another person. Not a goddess, not a queen, just a woman. The royal council argued loudly. He's dangerous. He should be executed. He is a primitive. But one voice cut through the chaos, the royal lawkeeper. An old alien whose skin looked like cracked marble. He spoke slowly, so all would hear. The law is older than this palace. Older than our empire, he said. If a male defeats the bonded champion in ritual combat, he inherits the role. Gasps echoed through the court. The princess did not blink. She already knew this, the lawkeeper continued, this human. By right, is now the legal mate of the princess. Another pause. And by extension, as per the ancient treaty of court service, he also claims the 6 royal handmaids. The human blinked. He understood the word mate and 6. Wait, what? One of the guards whispered Lucky under his breath, then quickly stood straight again. The princess stood slowly, her golden robe flowing like liquid light. She walked down the steps, eyes never leaving the human. The room fell silent. Again, she stood in front of him now, just a few steps away. He was tall, but not taller than her. She noticed his eyes first. They held something dangerous. Not hate, not fear. Something deeper, something wild. You do not look like a king, she said. The human shrugged. Didn't know I was trying. Some of the guards chuckled. She did not. You are not Voltraxian. She said, you are not one of us. Clearly, he replied, glancing at the alien crowd still staring. But you defeated our best, she said, her voice softening. Didn't mean to, he replied. Just wanted to live. She turned and spoke to the council. The law cannot be broken, she said. Her voice rang with strength now, even if I hate it. The council fell into stunned silence. The princess turned back to him. I will not have a ceremony, she said. I will not parade this pairing, but I will obey the law. The human raised an eyebrow. That makes 2 of us, he said quietly. She looked at the guards. Take him to the crystal bath, she ordered. Let the handmaids see what they are getting. As the guards moved him away, he asked, what does that mean? One guard laughed nervously. Means your life is about to get very strange, human. In another chamber far across the palace, the 6 royal handmaids whispered in a circle. They had seen the duel. They had seen what he did. They were supposed to be his now by law, by blood, by tradition. One of them, the youngest, said, do you think he'll hurt us? Another replied, he killed the champion like nothing. A third said, but he didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. He looked sad, said the fourth. Maybe he's not like the others. The door opened. 2 guards entered, followed by the human, wet from the ritual bath, shirtless and confused. He stopped when he saw them. 6 alien women, each with different features, glowing skin, feathered brows, strange eyes, but all watching him closely. He raised his hands high, he said simply. I didn't ask for this, but I'm not going to hurt any of you for the first time. They saw something in his eyes they hadn't seen in alien men before. Respect, real respect. The oldest handmaid stepped forward. Her voice was soft but firm. Then we will not fear you, and so in that quiet room, far from the shouting courts and deadly laws, a strange new bond began to grow, one not of force or tradition, but of curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, something more. The doors to the royal chambers opened slowly with a low humming sound. The human stepped inside, unsure if he was walking into a trap or something stranger. The guards stayed behind and shut the doors quietly, leaving him alone. The room was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls shimmered like liquid glass, glowing faintly in shades of purple and gold. Tiny stars floated in the air, not lights, real stars, alive and drifting slowly, like snow caught in moonlight. The floor was warm under his bare feet. smooth like silk and softly pulsing beneath him like a heartbeat. And then he saw them, 6 alien women, the handmaids, standing in a quiet line near the window of crystal, each one dressed in flowing robes, faces calm, but eyes watchful. He paused. They weren't scared. They weren't smiling either. They just waited. The tallest stepped forward. Her skin pale blue, and her eyes deep green like ocean glass. "I am Sirali," she said. "First handmaid of her grace, we were told. You are ours now." The human looked around and rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah. About that," he muttered. "I didn't exactly sign up for any of this." He took a breath. "But I don't want to hurt anyone. I'm just stuck." The second handmaid stepped forward, smaller, with feathers along her cheekbones, her voice softer than a breeze. "You are not like the others," she whispered. They all stared like we were property. "But you look at us like people." The human nodded slowly. "I don't know your customs," he said, "but where I come from, we don't take women like trophies." He looked around again. "I'm just a guy who survived a fight, that's all." A long silence filled the room. Then the youngest handmaid, the one with silver eyes and a scar across her neck, stepped forward. She held something small in her hands, wrapped in cloth. "Food," she said quietly. "You haven't eaten, have you?" The human blinked, surprised. "No, I haven't," he said, his stomach growling in agreement. She unwrapped the cloth. It was a warm piece of sweet root bread, common in their world, but she'd saved it. Just for him, he sat on the floor, cross-legged like a child, and took the bread gently. "Thanks," he said. "You didn't have to," she smiled, small but real. "Wanted to?" One by one, the handmaids sat around him, not in fear, not in duty, but in curiosity. They asked questions. What was Earth like? Did he really mean to kill the champion? Why didn't he scream victory? And he answered with stories of home, of forests and rain, of metal birds and real coffee. He made them laugh, real laughs, the kind that shake off centuries of silence. He even joked about his chains, saying, "Guess I've been traded up from prison to princess-level weirdness." They laughed again, even the scarred one, who hadn't laughed in years. High above, in a hidden part of the palace, the princess watched through the crystal wall. She had ordered the surveillance herself, curious and cautious. What she saw now made her uneasy. They were bonding not through law, not through control, but through something she couldn't name. Something gentle, something powerful. One of her handmaids leaned her head on the human's shoulder. Another fed him fruit. From her own hand, he didn't take advantage. He just smiled, slow and tired, but kind. The princess turned away from the screen, her heart heavier than before. She had hated him for breaking the law, for shaming her champion. But now, she wasn't so sure in the chambers below. The scarred handmaid whispered as she leaned close to the human. "You are not like the others," she said again. And for the first time in many years, her voice didn't shake when she added, "We are glad you came." Astrus night fell over the palace of Eltraxis. But this was no ordinary night. The sky above the capital shimmered with quiet tension. The stars looked down like silent judges. Inside the palace, all seemed calm, but beneath the still surface, trouble was moving. The human sat near a floating fire orb in the handmaid's common chamber. They had given him a robe made from soft alien fabric, royal but not flashy. He didn't feel like a king. He felt like a man caught in a strange dream. The scarred handmaid, named Arya, sat beside him, brushing her fingers across a map of the palace. "You should know this," she whispered, "in case things go wrong." The others looked around nervously. Sirali, the first handmaid, spoke softly. "There are some in the palace who want you dead." The human looked up, serious now. "Why?" "Because you embarrassed them," Sirali replied. "You broke their champion. And now? They're afraid you'll break more." In another corner of the palace, deep in the shadows, a secret meeting was taking place. 7 cloaked nobles, old and bitter, sat around a glowing table of bone. "The law binds her," one said, "but we don't have to obey it," another hissed. "Kill the human." Quietly. Before he poisons the bloodline, they passed a small silver vial between them, filled with a deadly sleeping agent. "No scars. No noise," the leader said. "He dies in his sleep. Back in the chamber, the handmaids were growing quiet. They could feel something in the air, too still, too cold. Arya suddenly stood up, her silver eyes narrowing. "I heard something," she whispered. The human stood, alert. "Where?" "The vents," she said. "Someone's moving, not staff." Just then, a small maid named Vela pulled something from her robe, a tiny translation device. She placed it in the human's ear. "You need to understand us faster now," she said. No time for confusion. The human blinked, and suddenly their words became clear. "No longer broken. Can you fight?" Sorelli asked, eyes sharp. The human's jaw clenched. "I already did," he said, "but I can do it again." Suddenly, the chamber door creaked, too soft, too careful, not normal. The human motioned for the handmaids to hide. He picked up a long candle rod from the wall, metal, heavy. Good enough. Two shadows slipped through the door, cloaked in dark robes, blades in hand. One moved toward the bed. Clearly thinking the human was asleep there, the other turned. Too late, the human struck with full force. Crack. The assassin slammed into the wall and dropped instantly. The second turned, blade up, but Sorelli stepped forward, gown glowing, and threw a glass bowl at his face. Smash. He stumbled. The human tackled him to the floor. 3 punches and the man stopped moving. Silence returned, heavy and loud. One of the maids began to cry. Arya put her arm around her, whispering comfort. The human stood, breathing hard. Blood on his cheek. "No more games," he said. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Sorelli nodded. "This was just the beginning," she said. "The nobles will try again, unless someone stops them, up in her throne chamber." The princess was already watching. Guards had rushed to the room after the alarm spell triggered. She watched through her mirror screen as her maids stood around the human. Defending him, she saw the way they looked at him, not with fear, with loyalty, with choice. The head of her guards turned to her. "Do you still want him removed?" "Your Grace?" The princess paused, then shook her head, slowly. "No," she whispered, "not anymore." She turned away from the screen, her heart beating fast. This man, this human, he was not bending their world. He was changing it, and she was no longer sure she wanted to stop him. The night sky over Veltraxis was wide and silent. Stars shimmered like cold silver eyes, watching the palace from above, but inside the royal gardens. Beneath the moon's soft light, a quiet meeting was happening, one that could change everything. Rin sat on a stone bench, bandages on his arm. Dried blood still on his sleeve. Across from him, Princess Vile stood still, her hands behind her back. For the first time, she was not wearing royal robes or armor. She wore something simple, and on her face was no mask, only truth. She spoke. "First, you should be dead." Rin looked up, calm but tired. "I've heard that before." He replied, "But I'm not." She stepped closer, her voice low. "You were attacked by assassins, in my palace, under my name. And yet, you protect my maids, fight without fear, and still sleep on stone." Rin said nothing. He simply watched her. She sat beside him slowly, not close, but not far. "Why didn't you kill the one who betrayed you?" she asked. "Your law doesn't work like that," Rin said. "And besides, if I killed every person who feared me, I'd never stop." There was silence. The stars twinkled above them like forgotten memories. Finally, Vial spoke again. "You broke our strongest warrior," she said, "but the real crack came after. My people no longer trust what they once believed." She turned to him, her eyes softer now. "They look at you and see an outsider, who didn't conquer us, but who chose to be kind instead. And that scares them more than your sword." Rin smiled faintly. "I don't want power," he said. "I want peace." "But peace doesn't come free." She nodded slowly. "I read the old texts," she whispered. "Long ago, humans came here. Your kind taught us many things, and then disappeared. My ancestors feared your kind would return," she continued. "So they rewrote history, buried truths, told us we were supreme." Rin looked at her with steady eyes. "And now, You know that was a lie. Vile didn't speak, but her silence was the answer. Elsewhere in the royal tower, nobles shouted behind closed doors. The human is a virus, one barked. A living spark of rebellion, said another. We must erase him before he infects the bloodline. An elder noble stood slowly, and if we fail? Silence fell over the table. No one had an answer, because they all knew something ancient had awakened, and not even a blade to the heart could kill what it had started. Bak-da-da-da. Back in the garden, Vile stood again. She walked to the edge of the balcony. Where vines grew wild, she looked up at the stars, her voice barely a whisper. You changed something in me, she said. I hated you for what you did to Droger. He was my protector, my friend, my future general. But then I saw how you fought, she added, not with rage, but with sorrow that confused me more than anything. Rin stood slowly and joined her. I don't fight to win, he said. I fight to stop wars before they start. She turned to him, this time without the coldness. My people expect me to choose soon, she said, to reject you and keep the old ways, or stand beside you and risk everything. He looked at her not with demand, not with begging, just quiet strength. The choice is yours, he said, but know this. I won't run if war comes. I'll stand for those who stood. For me, her heart trembled at those words, not from fear, but from something else, something dangerous, something hopeful. Later that night, in the handmaid's quarters, Tali whispered to the others, I saw her walk with him. She didn't shout, didn't spit, but she listened. Ina's eyes lit up. Does that mean we're safe now? Tali shook her head, no. It means the real war is starting soon, not with weapons, she added, but with choices. And far beyond the stars, in a forgotten part of space, a signal blinked on, a satellite. Ancient and covered in dust. Woke up. It sent a message across the void, for simple words. The flame has returned. And across galaxies, old watchers stirred, because one human had done more than survive. He had ignited destiny. The palace of Veltraxis no longer felt like home to Princess Vile. The halls were still polished, the banners still gold. But the whispers had changed. Where once her name inspired fear and pride, now it brought hesitation, even doubt, and that doubt was turning dangerous. She walked through the royal hall of echoes, a place where the voices of past rulers could be heard in moments of silence. Tonight, the echoes were louder than usual. But none of them sounded like her. Her guards bowed to her, but their eyes slid toward the shadows, toward the doors behind her. She felt it. The palace was watching, judging, and worse. Waiting for her to fall in the royal war chamber, the council of nobles met in secret. 7 seats filled, 1 empty, her father's old place, still untouched since his death. The eldest noble stood and spoke coldly. She has forgotten our blood, he said. She walks with the outsider, listens to him, protects him, and even questions the laws. Another voice added. She has become. Human murmurs followed. The people are losing faith. The soldiers doubt their orders. If she stands with him, the empire will fall. The elder raised a black tablet, a symbol of the ancient law of purging, if she will not protect the empire from corruption, he said, then she must be removed. As a traitor to her throne that night, Veal returned to her quarters to find her royal crest gone. The golden symbol once above her door had been removed. In its place hung the mark of questioning, a silent declaration that the princess was under review. She froze, her breath caught in her chest. No warning, no summons. Just this, a quiet attack, not with swords, but shame. Inside, her handmaids rushed to her side. Sorali clutched her sleeve. My princess, they moved your name to the lower ledger. That's where traitors go before sentencing. Vile's hands trembled, but her voice stayed calm. Where is Rin? Rin stood outside the south wall, training alone, even after the attack days ago. He stayed in open spaces, not hiding, never afraid. The training ground was quiet, but his blade moved fast, each swing smooth. Precise, a warrior in perfect control. She approached him under moonlight, her royal boots making no sound. He didn't look at her. He already knew she was there. "They've branded me," she said quietly. "They stripped my name from the high ledger." Rin stopped. Breathing slowly, "I'm sorry," he said, but not surprised. She walked closer. "I tried to protect their pride. I tried to follow their rules and still offer peace, but they don't want peace." Rin looked at her now. "They want obedience," he said, "and you finally stopped obeying." She laughed bitterly. "So now I'm a traitor because I let a human teach me something my empire refused to understand." A long pause passed between them. She looked at his blade, then into his eyes. "What would your people do if they saw me now?" she asked. Rin shrugged slightly. "Depends which people," he said. "Some would spit, but others would welcome the one who chose truth over power." Back inside the palace, the council made their move. A squad of elite royal guards marched down the western stair, each step planned, each sword drawn. Their goal, not to kill the princess, but to take her titles, strip her clothes of rank, and drag her to the sacred pit of judgment for public humiliation. But when they reached her chamber, they found it empty. She was already gone, a quiet storage wing far beneath the palace. Vile stood in silence as Sorali fastened old armor to her chest. It wasn't polished or jeweled, just steel and leather armor made for movement, not ceremony. Tali pulled her hair back into a warrior's braid. "You sure about this?" she asked. Vile didn't blink. "I'd rather be hunted for truth than worshipped in chains." A hidden door opened behind them, and Rin entered, dressed in travel gear. He offered no speech, just a simple nod. She returned it no longer. A princess, now. A warrior beside him, they left the palace through the underground path known only to royal blood.
Yes.
And as they vanished into the shadows beyond the city lights, the empire above continued as if nothing had changed, but something had for the first time in centuries. A Velkaran royal had walked away from the throne, and not for power, not for gold, but to follow a human, not as a prisoner, not as a concubine, but as an equal and far above. The stars moved slightly, as if making room, because the flame of Earth was no longer just a spark, it was becoming a fire, and the galaxy would soon feel its heat. Weeks passed. The palace of Veltraxis stood tall under twin suns. But its halls felt hollow, the throne sat heavy and cold, for it had no princess, no champion, and no control across the empire. Rumors spread like wildfire. The princess fled with the human, her own handmaids followed him willingly. The council tried to erase her name, but couldn't erase the truth. The nobles tried to calm the people. They gave speeches, declared new royal heirs, forged records, but none of it mattered because the people had already chosen a new name to whisper Rin. The human who didn't take slaves, but earned loyalty, far from the capital. In a mountain fortress abandoned for centuries, Rin stood at the edge of a training courtyard. The wind howled through the stone peaks. But his household, once called concubines, now trained beside him like warriors. Tali fired energy darts with sharp aim. Ina moved silently through the shadows, a scout in motion. Sorali taught refugee girls how to hold a blade without fear. And Vile, once a princess of pride, now stood in her war armor. Sword in hand, she had stopped asking for orders. Now she gave them, beside Rin as his partner. Not his prize. One day a messenger arrived, a young alien boy, breathless, scared. He bowed to Vile and held up a scroll sealed in the color of war. She opened it, her eyes scanning quickly, the color drained from her face. "They're sending the Black Banner," she said. "The Empire's coming to wipe us out." Rin asked calmly. "How many?" 5 battlecruisers, she said. "For royal generals?" And Droger's replacement. The courtyard fell silent. Even the wind paused. "Do we run?" Tali asked. "No," Vile said. "We stand." Rin nodded. "We don't need to defeat an empire," he said. "Just survive long enough to show them that fear is no longer their weapon." The night before the battle, Rin stood on the wall, looking at the stars. Vial joined him quietly, she said. "If we die tomorrow, I'll die freer than I ever lived." Rin smiled faintly. "We won't die," he said. "They'll come expecting slaves and rebels, but What they'll find is a home guarded by warriors. She looked at him then, really looked. Not as a human, not as an outsider, but as someone who had become the flame she once feared, and without a word she rested her forehead against his. There was no need to say it, the bond was already made. Dawn came like a knife through clouds. The enemy ships darkened the sky. The mountains shook with landing thrusters. The royal army marched forward with silver armor and gold banners. They expected to crush a scattered group of runaways, but when the fortress gates opened, they stopped. Out walked Vile in full armor, followed by Tali, Ina, Sarali, and over 100 volunteers who had joined their cause, and beside her Rin. Holding a blade that once defeated their greatest champion, the lead general stepped. Forward! Lay down your weapons, he shouted, and your punishment will be light. Vial raised her voice. No, she shouted back. We will not kneel, we will not crawl, and we will never again belong to anyone but ourselves. The army hesitated just for a second, because they saw something they didn't expect. Not fear, but fire in their eyes. The battle was fierce. Blades clashed. Energy burned the sky. Rin fought like a storm, not to kill, but to protect. His body bled, but his spirit stood tall. Vile moved like thunder. Each strike backed by years of rage and rebirth, Tali led ambush teams. Ina disabled ship systems with her quiet hands. Sareli stood at the gates with new warriors who once were maids, now soldiers, when it ended. The battlefield was silent. The Empire's army lay scattered. Not all were dead. Many had fled there. Hearts shaken by what they saw, a human household had defeated an Empire's pride. It's not with machines, but with truth. Weeks later, songs spread across distant systems, not of kings, not of empires, but of a human and his household, of a princess, who gave up her crown to follow a man with no title, of maids who became warriors, in a fortress where no soul bowed in chains. They called it the House of Flame, and wherever injustice lived. That flame burned brighter, because in the end, the galaxy didn't remember who ruled the throne, it remembered who lit the fire, and Rin, the human no one wanted, had become the flame that would never die.